And welcome back. Now we're going to get to the Bergdahl case. Bergdahl, if you remember, he left his post in Afghanistan, member of the U.S. military, in 2009. He was then captured and held by the Taliban for 5 long years. Now, though, he's facing federal charges, in fact, 2 of them, the most serious of which could carry a maximum sentence of life in prison.
Sergeant Bergdahl is charged under the Uniform Code of Military Justice with 1 count of Article 85, desertion with intent to shirk important or hazardous duty, and 1 count of Article 99, misbehavior before the enemy by endangering the safety of a command, unit, or place.
All right, this is what we do here every week. We put 2 of our friends here against each other because that's the kind of awful people we are. And we begin with opening arguments. And first here arguing for the defense is Mr. Kousouros. Jim.
Good evening. I represent Bo Bergdahl, and I respectfully submit that my client should not be punished any further for the events which began in 2009 when he walked off his base in a delusional state and which resulted in 5 years in the hands of the Taliban. Now, there's nothing unpatriotic about this stance. It comes with full recognition of the seriousness of true desertion by a member of the military and with full recognition of the danger which befell those who searched for my client. Now look, all prosecutorial decisions must take into account both aggravating and mitigating circumstances specific to each case. This is not a case for which additional punishment after 5 years of torture by the Taliban is warranted. This was a young kid that we sent to a real war. And because nobody bothered to do a background check, he was sent into battle when he should not have been. Not all young men and women we send into the battlefield are emotionally and mentally equipped to handle it. Before we send our young men and women to war, we have an obligation to make certain that they are equipped. This was not done in this case. My client had previously attempted to join the Coast Guard but was discharged during training for psychological reasons. This was public information and the Army should have known it and should not have sent him into war.
Hear, hear. All right, time now for Mark Furnish, who takes the other side. Drop the hammer, Mark.
The torture Sergeant Bergdahl allegedly endured was cruel and barbaric, but it doesn't excuse the damage he caused by abandoning an isolated post deep in hostile territory. Bergdahl's desertion put his fellow soldiers squarely at risk, forcing them to hunt for him in one of the most dangerous spots on Earth. It spurred the release of suspected enemy combatants, terrorists in waiting as ransom for his return, and it discredited our military, making us weak and undisciplined in the eyes of our foes. All these dire consequences were readily foreseeable, if not inevitable, when Bergdahl chose to throw down his guns and run. He should be prosecuted and punished to the full extent of military law.
All right, I see a little daylight between the 2 opinions, and Mr. Von Oist and Mr. Bartlett have at them.
You want to go?
Please.
So let me ask you, Mark, do you agree that this is a very unusual case and that his sentence of 5 years was a horrific experience for him?
Yes.
And do you agree also that the purpose of a prosecution like this is to punish the person so that future acts like this are deterred from happening?
Yes.
So do you think that there's any further benefit to punishing this person any further? Because clearly he's been punished and it would deter anybody from doing a like thing in the future.
The harm that his behavior caused to our country, to the military as an institution, and to his fellow soldiers is not vindicated by the torture that he endured at the hands of his captors. So yes, I believe further punishment is warranted.
Jim.
Sir.
Do you believe that there's a real interest that the United States has in terms of its individuals, its citizens, and its military in having a cohesive military where people have rules and that they understand that they can't flee in the face of danger?
I absolutely do. And as we were talking about before, every host has certain obligations. My client was discharged from the Coast Guard during training for psychological reasons. But that's, I guess, what we do. We don't care. We just accept them, we give them guns, and we send them to war. The reality is, I couldn't agree more that this country has an interest in a cohesive military, and that the danger that befalls soldiers who have to look for somebody in this position is huge. But he did not desert in the traditional sense. He did not behave badly before the enemy. He was tortured by the enemy, and he left his post in a delusional state. Not a state where he was holding a placard up saying, I'm joining the Taliban and I hate the United States. And every indication is he tried to escape, he was tortured, and every indication is he had no intentions of remaining away permanently.
I got one quick question for each. Mr. Furnish. To you, does it make any difference if we found this guy sipping a Mai Tai in Bora Bora, or if we found him after 5 years in captivity under Taliban thumb?
It makes a world of difference, I think.
But if we're looking potentially charge him with life imprisonment as a punishment, it doesn't seem what he did in that 5 years made a difference if he fled from post to go enjoy himself in a life of leisure, or if he suffered at the hands of the enemy.
Well, we have to distinguish between convicting him and punishing him. I actually would argue that his presence among the Taliban makes what he did worse. Putting aside the torture that he endured, we don't punish him for what he thinks. We don't punish him for how he behaves. There are plenty of people who have scruples, moral objections to war. Goes back to Vietnam and before World War II. People don't run away. He, in addition to what Jimmy said, he may have had psychological problems, but his writings also show, those that have been leaked, that he had tremendous sympathies for the enemy.
And Jim, for me, people suffered. Forget about it, as Mark mentioned, 5 people that we put back into the war arena here that will do harm, arguably, to the United States and to our interests. But other soldiers potentially either lost their lives or were injured here in the attempted rescue of them. What do we say as a punishment for some ancillary, in effect, collateral that was caused by his desertion?
It makes such a world of difference, your question. Again, he was in a delusional state, and I differ, Mark. He wasn't sympathetic to the enemy. He was sympathetic to the Afghan people and the fact that his colleagues were simply indifferent, in his opinion, to all the killing he was seeing. He was not mentally and emotionally equipped, and all I'm saying is these are mitigating circumstances that affect the punishment. Dishonorably discharge him. He's tainted for life. He was tortured for 5 years where he was not sympathizing with these people. He was in a delusional state that really was predictable. We shouldn't have sent them.
Gentlemen?
Just everything that you're saying really goes to sentencing, right? I mean, you're kind of saying he should be charged, he should plead guilty or be convicted, and then everything you're saying is really going to what sentence he should.
Not necessarily. I do not think that if you look at the elements of the crimes for which he's charged, certainly the behaving badly before the enemy, I don't see.
Well, there's obviously things that we don't know about this, right, because as we saw the statutory elements ticked up on the screen, that's the real severe charge that carries the life sentence.
That's right.
They're charging him with jeopardizing the safety of his entire unit. Now, I don't know if that's done because he walked away or because he did something more that we don't know about. That's a very, very serious charge.
But there's an intention. That's what I'm saying. Is it intentional? I mean, if he's in a delusional state because he's so emotionally disturbed, you have to at least consider that.
If you give up the position of your unit, if you give up information critical to the mission, I guess that would make it.
When he ran away.
But don't you also agree, Mark, that it's not necessarily Mr. Bergdahl, but it's his superiors, the people who decided that he was somehow not fit for the Coast Guard, but fit to serve in combat.
I don't think that's going to be a defense.
Well,
of the military justice
but I'm
system.
just thinking in terms of additional charges. Don't you review those people who placed him there? By placing him there, they endanger his entire group of comrades who are serving with him.
Well, I should say that I don't agree with the position that I took orally, but I think that you I think that you actually nailed it in your questions to Jimmy. The military justice system focuses on unit cohesion and discipline, and none of these arguments are going to play well with a member's
By the way, I
panel
learned a
on
lot of
military
legal terms doing what Mr. Furnish just threw himself just there by taking both sides here on the mercy of the court. And speaking of the court, you have a voice in this jury here. He is the subject of our online question, not Mark, but Mr. Bergdahl today. Go over to Facebook and Twitter and answer it. Should Bergdahl face federal charges for leaving his post given what happened to him in those 5 years? And speaking of the case, our control room is busy keeping the show not only on the air, but also playing jury here, deliberating. When we come back after the break, we'll find out who gets thumbs up, thumbs down. Stay with us. We'll be right back.